Hello humans, welcome to the N-Word, the Manx Sports podcast, brought to you by Martin, that's me.
And Matt.
That's him over there. Hello Matthew, again.
Morning.
Morning, you sound very hungover.
Not at all.
Liar. Just a couple of things to boot off with. First of all, Billboards, our sponsor. Again, I say it every week, but I thank them for their work they do for us. Their digital advertising, you've seen their boards around the island, in town, etc. So if you want to get your brand out there during the lockdown or post-lockdown, depending on when you listen to this, they're the guys to speak to. Digital advertising, future advertising. So get in touch with the boys down there. We're joined today by Paul. So welcome, Paul.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for the invite.
No pleasure. The introduction clip there, anyone who's certainly a reasonable sports fan and certainly football fan will recognise the tune, which is, I just thought I'd play as Champions League music, which certainly puts the spine tingles on most, certainly football fans or teams that have played in it. And being a Liverpool fan, I'm certainly one of them. I thought it was appropriate because obviously it's interweaved throughout Paul's life, football, so I thought it was quite relevant. So to kick things off, as normal, we'd like to ask, are you a come over, Manx, or Manx as the hills, yes sir?
Yeah, I'm a Manx. I was born here, dragged up in Ballabeg in the deep south. Dad's family is Welsh, mum's family is English. But actually, if you go down my dad's mum's side of the family, she's a Kinvig. So many years ago, when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, we thought we'd have a look at our genealogy a little bit and find out, where this kid we were producing really kind of comes from, the background of it all. And turns out on the Kinvig side that we're Peel people. So she moved over to Liverpool, and that's where she was growing up for a few in her family generation. But when you trace that line back, you get to Peel, which I need to say quite quietly as an ex-Russian player. But my genealogy, a quarter of it is Peel.
That's pretty Manx, though. We'll go.
Yeah.
We'll go with that. So obviously you mentioned there you grew up early days down Ballabeg, way down south of the island, and was schooling in the younger years down south, I assume.
Yeah, Arbury. Which was still is a small primary school. There's like 100, 150 of us in that, and then on to Castle Rushen. So yeah, that was my school until 16, and then I disappeared off the Isle of Man.
So during the school year, sport part of that for you?
Massive, yeah, huge, yeah. But the island's it's really reasonably small place, and my dad was well known in football circles, and my mum, played netball and was involved in an awful lot of sport on the Isle of Man. So I couldn't have done anything else really. My childhood was always either with a ball or with a bat or with a club. So it was knocking about in the garden all hours, riding bikes. It was a very, very active kind of childhood based around sport, and I absolutely loved it. It's always has been a big part of my life, and from the earliest memories, it's sport or playing games in the garden or whatever it might be that we've done.
Was your dad? You mentioned your dad. Was your dad a reasonable footballer on the island? Was he?
Yeah,
you're going to tell me he's captain now, wasn't he? And won like excellent.
Dad was like happy childhood memories watching him and his contemporaries play for Rushen. Every Saturday go down with my nana, home and away, and I'd be kicking a ball about, but I'd be watching him and watching the lads play, and he was an exceptional footballer. If he'd have been in England, like so many people that we could think about in a lot of different sports, if he'd have grown up in England, he would have been playing at the highest level of professional football. He had a few opportunities to do that, but he wasn't allowed. He had to go to university because his nana was, or his mum, was pretty strict. So. Because he didn't have a dad, his dad died when he was 5. So he very really close with his mum. So if she said to do something, that's what he did more often than not at that younger ages. So he didn't really get the opportunity to be a professional. I think he could have gone to New Zealand at one point before I was born and played professionally over there, and they just him and my mum decided not to. But he was an exceptional footballer, and I always feel like I've been trying to live up to how good he was.
Where did he play? Position-wise?
He was a forward, like Peter Beardsley type-esque player.
Right.
That's called Ray Howard.
Just better
Peter
looking.
Beardsley. Well, yeah, maybe. yeah, I think so. But yeah, just an exceptional person who understood the game and played it on a different level. And it's Manx football, but yeah, he was on a different planet, really, Dad. And even playing as a 40, 50-year-old in 5-a-sides or 3-a-sides, he'd still be one of the best players on the pitch.
Reading the game.
He was just, and I don't know, I guess I probably never really tell him, but I was always really proud to be his son, because he was just that good, and everyone just had so many good things to say about him as a human being as well as a footballer. That's quite hard to live up to, though.
Yeah, I'm sure. You mentioned there you left Ireland at 16. Was that to pursue sport? So just before that, then you're obviously playing sport locally. You're playing for Russian. Obviously, pretty good, I guess, on that basis that you moved away to pursue it.
I was. I guess I was. I was half decent. I was one of those annoying people at school that was good at most sports. I was reasonably well liked by people who like sport, but I'm not sure how liked I was by everybody else. And and sport kind of kept me going. I was reasonably academic, but I didn't try at school. From 10 years of age, if anyone asked me what I wanted to be, it was a professional footballer. Right. What if you don't want to be a professional footballer? Well, I'm going to be a professional footballer. And there was no pathway for me. There was no, it was just, that's all I want to do. And
So was that your decision to move away then? Or was that a club or someone coming to you saying to come away and potentially play for them?
Yeah. So this was back in 1990. 14 to when I was 14, 15, so 93, 90, 92, 93. There was two people that came into my life that had a huge impact on me, and one was a guy called Paul Truman, who started up the Centre of Excellence, the Football Centre of Excellence on the Isle of Man, and another guy called Richard Hodgson, who used to be the head of Manx Sport and Recreation. But he had history with Manchester City in professional football, and actually left the Isle of Man and went on to work for the English FA as an advisor to Trevor Brooking, and had quite a big impact within the English FA. And those guys came into around my life between the ages of 11 and 16. And if they hadn't moved to the Isle of Man, then there was zero pathway really for anybody to get away and play football. So I was doing okay, I had this ambition, but I had no way of being able to figure out how. And Dad, my family didn't have any connections in the professional game, so there was no way that, we could pull strings. And being from a little backwards, you're not on anybody's sort of radar. So to be fair to Richard, he saw something in a few of us over here. He started arranging trips away. And one of those trips away was to play against Manchester City. And that was when we were 14, 15. And unbeknownst to me at the time, Manchester City was short of a centre-back. And I didn't really play centre-back. But for a year before that, Richard was training me to be a centre-back. And we went away, we played that game, and I didn't realise it was a trial game, but it was a trial game for me. And after that game, they signed me. So I was a schoolboy for Manchester City, so under 16s. They took me away to a tournament in France pretty quickly that summer. We were playing against Marseille, Montpellier, and Saint-Étienne, Standard Liège, like subclassic, like European clubs. And this is how naive I am, or was, and probably still am to an extent. Like I just went and played, and I went to go and be a squad player and see the experience, but they put me in from day one for the first game, and I played every game as a centre back, as a 16-year-old, in an under 16s team, and I was a year young, so I was under 15 playing in an under 16s team in a tournament that I found out afterwards was an under 18s tournament. So we were playing against some of the best under 18s of the clubs across Europe, and I was an under 15 playing in an under 16s team. And I just went and played, and I played really, really well. And I was like, you know what? I'm not far away.
I was going to say, did you notice a big class? I mean, I'm sure there is a class difference from playing local football, but did you notice that? Because everyone on the pitch, I guess, has got ability, whereby perhaps locally it's more of a mixture.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. From what I'm a good observer, so you, depending on how long we go on for, you may or may not think I'm a great talker. But you know, when I'm talking about stuff I'm interested in and passionate about, I'm a reasonably good talker. I'm not a great asker of questions, and that's more from my insecurity of putting myself forward and asking questions. But I'm a really good observer. So all those times I've spent watching football as an observer, I'm not just watching like players and following the ball. I'm understanding the game. So even at that age, I was able to go in and understand the patterns of the game and be able to cope. And I'm playing as a centre back. You know, I'm a bit of a skinny so-and-so. I'm only 6 foot, and back in those days, you needed to be a bit of a brute, and you were going to head and kick and tackle and hit an elbow. And you know, that European, going into that tournament, it was a very technical type tournament, and I got away with it because I read the game well, and I was covering positions, and I didn't do anything complicated, and I just did my job. And I was decent, you know. I came away like full of confidence. Colin Bell was one of the youth team managers. He's obviously a Man City legend. He took me under his wing a little bit and gave me loads of advice, and it was just a really nice environment. There was the guy, I don't think anyone really properly made it out of that team other than a guy called Michael Brown, right. Who went on to captain, I think, Man City and Tottenham, and is doing a bit of punditry these days. You know, all that group, Jeff Whitley was in that group, I think, and a few others, and they were decent lads, and you know, I got on really well with them, and it ended up after that, Peter Reid came over to the Isle of Man, who was the manager of Man City at the time, and signed me. And there was a little bit of an article that Mum's kept in a scrapbook of me being signed by Peter Reid for Man City, and I thought, right, I've got a chance now. Do you know what I mean?
What age were you when you signed that contract?
15, but it was a schoolboy contract, so it was a year. It was to take me through to under 16s.
So they pay for you to go back and forth, do they, and then play?
Yeah, so I was one of the original Sport Aid Foundation, as it was then. I got a few flights for Manx Airlines, which helped me to do that, and I was going away as often as either the family could afford, or Man City would pay, or Sport Aid could afford for me to go and play for Man City's youth team. And all that was going really well. I, got in with the lads, a good, decent group of lads behind the years, naive, quiet, introverted young lads from the Isle of Man coming into this group of kids who were from Moss Side and had been around the professional game a long time already. You know, people who were like Lee Crook was in our team. He was a England international at that age. There was another lad who'd been at Lilleshall for 3 or 4 years. You know, the top players, and not many of them went to have a career. But you know, you going into that group, I'd love to go back to that time in my life when you just don't think.
Yeah,
you don't overthink.
But you talked earlier there about that kind of naivety of just kind of cracking on with it, and you don't kind of realise, which in some ways maybe at times a good thing, because maybe you think about it too much, then you end up overanalyzing.
Completely, and that's what I turned into, this kind of like paralysis by analysis. Because I was overthinking stuff, but at that time I'd just go and crack on and do what came naturally to me, and fortunately it was good enough. But yeah, that didn't quite work out, and it mainly didn't work out because for 3 years I would go away on a German exchange. So Castle Rush would have a German exchange. I'd go to Bavaria for a week or two, and German was actually something I really enjoyed at school, and I had a bit of a knack for it for whatever reason. So in that November, when I was playing at Man United, playing in a Manchester derby as a 16-year-old, at the Cliff, it was a awesome experience, and that kind of emotion that you see in the senior side is still there at the under 16s level as well, as I'm sure you probably imagine. So I went away to Germany for a week or however long it was, and like I went to the same family every year, and They're one lovely family, and the mum just is a bit of a feeder, as most probably German mums are. So it's full of brötchen, salami in the mornings. Like if I didn't have 4 or 6 baps of salami at breakfast, there was something wrong with me. So I probably overate and didn't look after myself. And I went back, and I think the first game back was Liverpool at home. And I was awful. I was so off the pace. I felt probably half a stone overweight, and I was just terrible. And then the week after was Huddersfield, I think, and it was snowing. It was a horrible pitch. There was no football played. And again, I was poor, really poor compared to what it had been. And I didn't know at the time, again, you don't know, but I didn't know that there was budget cuts at City going on. They dropped their full-time youth teams from 2 to 1. So therefore, there's fewer scholars, YTS scholars going forwards. And those 2 games were enough for them to say, he's too far off the lads we've got at the minute. He's a bit of an unknown quantity because he's from the Isle of Man. Let's stick with the lads we know rather than take a chance. So they let me go halfway through that season, basically saying there's not enough space for you. If we had 2 youth teams, we'd kept you. And if you didn't, but we've not, so we're going to go with what we've got.
Was that a surprise to you at the time?
Not really, because the youth team manager used to pick me up and drop me off at the airport. And after that second game, when he was dropping me off the next day, he was kind of saying, well, no, actually, we used to go to first team games and be the, after our game on a Saturday morning, we'd go, and any home games, we'd go and help out in the dressing rooms and clean the dressing rooms up and all the rest of it. And I think it was, they were playing QPR. So Trevor Sinclair, Les Ferdinand and all them. And I had the away dressing room, I think. And at half time, I think the youth team manager said to the lads, look, Jonesy doesn't have to do stuff today. Let him just go and enjoy the game. And I was kind of like, right, what's going on here? And then on the car on the way back, he was like, we've got some budget issues and we're going to have to cut down numbers. We've not made any decisions yet, but I just thought
laying the foundations.
Yeah, and you could see he was being quite clever. And then a couple of days later, my dad gets a phone call, or my mum does, and obviously that's it, job done. It was a bit of a bolt out of the blue for them, but for me, I'd kind of like gone, all right, so that makes sense now why they were saying that.
Yeah.
But I still felt it was a little bit unfair, and mainly because they'd been in, the lads who they took on had been in the system 3, 4, 5 years, and I'd come from back ass of nowhere really in the grand scheme of things, and more than coped at that level with I wasn't training with them. They were still training 3 times a week as a group, and I was just going in on a Sunday and playing and doing as well as most of them most of the time. So I was kind of like saying, well, imagine if you had me for 2 years. How good could I be? But even now, football doesn't think like that. They prefer to have the safe commodity than the risk, and that's the bit of an issue for getting Manx people into any professional sport, is that they're not part of the system. So they're a bit of an unknown, and a lot of people, because jobs are on the line, if you get things wrong or you miss the players, then they tend to go with safety rather than risk. So I understand why they made the decision. To be fair to them, they wrote a wonderful letter and sent it out to all the clubs in England. It was a really nice letter, to be fair to them. I've still got a copy of it.
Right.
That did me a fair amount of good. I had a lot of clubs all across the country ringing me up and asking me to go on trial, and you very quickly go from a disappointment to going, wow, look what else is out there.
Yeah, right. So what opportunities came out of that letter that eventually took?
I didn't make the most of it, to be honest.
Right.
I didn't make the most of it, so I could have and should have gone to Sunderland, who were another year or 2 after that. They got promoted into the Premier League if they weren't already there, and had a bit of a history of a good youth setup and doing well. I could have gone to Doncaster. Doncaster didn't really see me and gave me 2 years and a year pro, just off the recommendation from Man City. And I could have gone there, and they were a club where if you did quite well, you'd have gone into the first team. And once you're playing in the first team as an 18, 19-year-old, you're going to get looked at. And I could have gone to a lot of different clubs on trial, and it turned out I went to Stockport County through Richard, and they were the first club to see me. And again, I did well, and they really were keen to have me, and they kind of said, look, we want you to sign, but we want you to commit to us and not go anywhere else. And I felt a bit uncomfortable with that at the time, but I'm a bit more of a, back then I was probably more of a follower. So I would go with what people told me, and mum and dad are risk averse as well in many ways. So we were kind of like, well, you've got an offer. Let's not do anything to jeopardize them taking that offer away. Now, the advice that I give to people now is go and see as many different places as possible to figure out which is the best fit for you. And I'd have loved to have gone to Sunderland.
Right.
But mum wanted me in Manchester because it was easy for me to to get to and from. So I ended up going to Stockport. Which
what way were they? What were they, League Two at the time?
They were just got promoted. So
right.
The season I joined, Danny Bergara was manager. I don't know if you remember it. Kev Francis, the big 6'7", black lad who played up front. Him and Andy Crease were ripping it up in League Two. So I went into that group having just had a promotion. I was a new 16-year-old from the Isle of Man that no one had ever really heard of. And it was always, I got a bit of stick for it from the other lads, but Stockport was always meant to be a stepping stone out. It was a chance to regroup and go on to bigger and better things, because I thought I'd proven that I could do it within a Premier League football club academy. It didn't quite turn out like that, but they were on the up. They played League One as it is now, Division 3, I think it was then, and they were a decent group. The manager really liked me, Danny Bergara, a really eccentric Uruguayan chap who played in the World Cup in the 1950s and was just an absolute legend of a guy. He really liked me. The youth team manager really, or so I felt, really liked me. I felt like I was going into quite a supportive club. The physio had a big impact on me. A guy called Roger Wild, who had a history at Chef Wednesday as a player in Porto, and one of Roger's claims to fame is he started a riot in Porto in the local derby when he got substituted, and he threw the fingers up at the home fans, and a riot ensued. So he was a bit of a character and had a bit of an impact on me and on my later career, which maybe due to how Roger was.
And did you play centre back at Stockport?
Yeah, I did, believe it or not. Yeah, I did.
I get the impression you'd want to play somewhere else then, would you?
Like I always played midfield and a bit more of an attacking player, but obviously the level when you go off island, you go into the professional game, the level's so much higher, and you end up drifting back the pitch because it gives you more time and space, and you see the game a little bit more, and then maybe you can bounce back up again, but there's a lot of players like Fabian Delph. When I worked at Leeds, Fabs was there as an under 14, and he was the most skillful player, one of the best players you've ever seen at that age. But you wouldn't know it now playing in the Premier League, because he's a bit of a passer and a digger, and Michael Brown was the same. He got a reputation of being a kicker and a clogger playing in Man City's first team, but he was such a skillful, clever, attacking midfielder playing in behind the 9 as a youth team player. And there's lots of players like that who are playing in the Premier League now who were these very skillful players as a youth team who aren't good enough to be that sort of player in the Premier League. And the level that these Messis and Ronaldos and some of the best in the world are is just frightening, because guys that we all would think would be these amazing footballers are the water carriers in teams that they play in. Do you know what I mean? So I was a bit like that. I found a place with centre back that gave me a lot of time to see the game. I could make decisions. I could pass. I was one of my strengths. But it was always, without sounding too arrogant, it was always a bit too easy.
Right.
Because I could run. I had a proper engine on me. I was fit as a fiddle. Every pre-season I went into, I was the fittest at the club bar none. I would win every race. The first team lads used to give me pelters for making them look ridiculous, and I just didn't care. I was like, I'm here to show I am the best in this club and to play first team and get out of here. And I was really kind of driven that first kind of year and a half to show everyone that I didn't deserve to be here. Do you know what I mean? I can be better. And I was kind of doing all right. I'd set myself some goals that first year of playing regularly in the youth team. of maybe making some appearances in the reserves, maybe getting into a first team squad at some point. And I'd done the first two by Christmas. I was a regular in the reserves. I was playing youth team. I was training with the first team most weeks. And doing really, really well. Again, without thinking, just going and doing it and having a bit of a goal and just cracking on and giving it a lash. And kind of that first year went really, really well. But then Danny got the sack. Danny Bergara got the sack. And for me, the environment changed a little bit. And I went from feeling very supported to feeling under threat. Mainly because the manager's son played the same position as me.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I got shifted out to fullback. So I played the majority of the second half of that first season as a left back.
Right.
Having never played there before and not given any instruction on how to play there. And then I got shifted to right back for the second year and was doing okay. The first team right back used to ask how I got on in every reserve team game because he knew I was being a bit of a threat to him, but never really felt that. It just felt like me be the world. You know what I mean? The manager's son was getting the opportunities that I felt I should have had in a position that I clearly shown was probably my best position. So,
do you think that was grating away at you? I presume.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Over time, it. I didn't help myself. I was living away from home. I was living with 5 lads in a 3-bed house with a lovely little old lady called Joan who used to look after us, and she was fantastic. But
were you all footballers in the house?
Yeah. So it was like digs, So I had 4 lads from, one in the first year, a lad from Derbyshire, and 4 lads from Norwich, who all knew each other, and then me. And there was no getting away from anybody. It was, but I'd try and do extra, and then I'd get abuse from the lads for doing extra, and the lowest behaviours drag everybody else down. So because I didn't have maybe that support system around me to keep me going, I eventually came down to everybody else's level rather than maintain my level. And that I still kind of think about that and go, you had it in you to keep going, but you let other people kind of drag you back down.
But you're also thinking that with a 40-year-old mind on now as well, aren't you? Where everyone's so much, we are all so much wiser, aren't we? That you could be in that 17-year-old body now with the brain that you think now.
100%, 100%. And I don't really think about that time a huge amount, to be honest. It feels like a completely different lifetime ago, and I'm a very, very different. Well, I'm probably more like that person now than I have been for the last 20 years. I've kind of come back to being a truer version of myself, if you know what I mean. But maybe we'll explore that as we go along. But those first 18 months, I was flying. I was doing really well, and then I got an injury that required an operation. It's fairly common for footballers. It was a double hernia repair. It was a mesh repair. That at that time was 10 to 12 weeks recovery. I had the operation, I think, in March. And to be fair to the new manager at the time, so the guy called Dave Jones, who went on to manage Southampton, they gave me the contract, a professional contract offer before I had my operation. He was like, don't need to worry about anything, just go and get well, and then come back in when you're ready and come into pre-season. And I did that.
This was then into really year 3.
So year 3, yeah. And I'd been playing regularly in the reserves still, which was a better league than the under-23s league now. It was a proper, players who weren't playing first team would be playing in there rather than it being a 21, 22-year-old age group. And I'd been in squads for the first team, never made the bench or anything, but I remember we had a good run in the FA Cup that year, I think, and we played Everton. I was in the match day squad travelling group that went to that, and it was nice to be around those sort of occasions. So I thought going into my year pro, I've got a chance of now pushing on and and getting the second contract, which is the biggest one. The first one's the easier one to get. It's the second one, because the second one means you're likely to have a career in the sport or the game. And then I went to Germany to see that family during the off season. And every off season, I'd done some training. I come back to Alaman and trained with Richard and Dicko, who was over at Carlisle. And we trained hard for like 3 weeks, and that's why we were flying. And I'd kind of done that for 2 and a bit years. I'd also, in the last 2 years, GCSEs years, I was travelling up to Douglas. I was training maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week, getting the bus up to Douglas and getting down south, then training with the local football guys. So I really invested a lot of time and energy. And that summer, I kind of felt like I needed a bit of downtime. So I went to Germany for a week. And didn't do any exercise. I took a big bag with me, and I remember vividly lifting the bag out of the back of their car to go to the airport and get the flight home. And I just felt something in the lower abdomen, and it was like a tearing, nipping feeling. And that ended up having another bit of surgery, but I didn't have the surgery for kind of 10 months, and it was affecting everything that I was doing. Unfortunately, I could get away with stuff, and it didn't really affect me playing, but it just was really uncomfortable. It was horrible. And pre-season, I was doing really quite well. We were due to go to Portugal on a pre-season trip, and I don't even know why I said it. 3 or 4 days before that trip, I went into the physio room, and Roger had been like probably the most supportive, along with Bish, the kit man, of me in the whole previous 2 years. They were there for me completely. But then as soon as I became pro, like that relationship with Rog changed, and suddenly, but he was like that with everybody. Do you know what I mean? He's like that caring, compassionate side, and now you're a professional. It's like, you know, what you're doing. I'm not here to have a nice chat with you. Like, F off, get back to the dressing room. And, you know, that dressing room was still the youth team dressing room for me.
Yeah, right.
The manager didn't move me up to the first team dressing room. I didn't get a first team tracksuit. I didn't get made to feel like a professional. And I understand now why they were kind of doing it. They wanted me to earn the right to be in that dressing room, but they hadn't laid down those rules or criteria or explained that at all. It was kind of like, you staying away, stay down there. So yeah, I flagged up this injury or concern, which meant that I didn't go on the trip. And they went away for 2 weeks. I was basically isolated in the training ground, training with the youth team, who were my group, you know, only 3 months earlier. So it wasn't too bad. But the first team lads came back absolutely flying, and I just couldn't really make the difference up. Yeah, and right. There was a new group. There were some really good characters in that group, new players. The level had gone up a notch from where I'd been before they went away, and it really affected me. I think I never really quite got it back, and then it was this downward spiral of lower and lower confidence in what I was doing, and over-analysing and over-questioning and playing the victim rather than taking ownership and responsibility, and blaming everybody else. And
was the people not in the club that would try and help with that, whether it be psychologists or anything, or at that level, is that not really there?
It was...
And that era as well, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it was a long, long way before any of those kind of interventions. You know, it was before the ITV television money, you know, so I signed my pro contract on 120 quid a week, I think it was, with digs included, so it would work out £170 a week. That there was no real support. Anything you did away from the ground was up to you. I tried to do an A-level, a biology A-level, and I had to get the club to sign that off for PFA funding, and I think that did me in as well, because they were looking at me going, you're not invested in being a professional footballer. And I was kind of like, but I'm bored. You know, I'm a reasonably intelligent young man. I don't want to sit and play FIFA all the time. I don't want to, you know, just turn into this stereotypical footballer. But that was a threat, I think, you know.
It's weird though, because you'd think they'd obviously want to support education, wouldn't you? I'm sure it's perhaps different now.
It's very different now. You know, having worked in there myself, it's very, very different to the environment that I was in. And I always felt like again, I'm always reticent of looking back and talking about it too much, because as you said before, you're looking at everything with a 40-year-old head on. You know what I mean? So you may be either making excuses or you're finding things that were never there. In an order for either for justification or for having to say something. But I certainly feel a little bit of an outsider in that world, even though I've been part of that world in some quite big clubs since. I don't know, there's just something about that world of football that just doesn't fit for me.
Right.
And I don't quite know what it is. You know, and it's different now to how it was then, but I'm not a big kind of macho alpha sort of male. I'm not posturing. I'm not willing to kick people for the sake of it. I'm not willing to stitch people up in order to get a place in the team or the squad or whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? I'm maybe a bit too nice, and I think a lot of people from the Isle of Man who have tried to go away aren't quite maybe cutthroat enough. But there's ways and means to go about it, and it didn't always kind of sit with me.
Well, like you say, if you're brought up in the UK and you're going through this system from an early age, I guess maybe you learn that earlier that, you know, you have to be more pushy or more, you know, cut people's throats, for the want of a better expression, to get moving on.
Or do you even just having that bit about you to go knock the door on the manager's office and say, why am I playing? What can I do to improve? Why is it that you don't like me? Is it because, you know, just have... I was really young, and I think a lot of people coming from our community are young in the sense, you know, even at 17, 18, 19, 20, you know, Christian was saying it in the conversation you had with him, you know, going away at those ages, so much you've got to learn about the world to help you navigate through it. And I wasn't confident enough to go and have conversations with people in authority. I've been brought up that if someone in authority tells you something, that's it, just job done. You know, go and prove to them on the training pitch you're good enough. Whereas other people would be knocking on the door, and strangely enough, the players who were knocking on the door causing trouble usually got the first chance, because they were the ones, the manager knew that if they messed them around, they'd be on the door giving him grief. Where they mess someone like me around, that he's just going to keep quiet and give him an easier life. So I didn't play the game off the pitch as well as I probably needed to give myself opportunities on the pitch, and that's something that I'm trying to bring through with the work I'm doing now, is to give people that voice and that feeling that they can have a voice, and actually asking why and what about me is, they're all right. You know, it's okay as long as you're doing it with the right intentions and doing it in the right way, that actually that's something you need to do.
It's okay.
So I probably, that time in my life, I didn't probably, I didn't drink, you know, I wasn't, you know, I was a goody two shoes, you know, I was a bit of a square as a kid, and I took that, I was a bit of a geek, and I took that into the football, and for, you know, up until my year pro, I was good as gold. And then it went off the rails, to be honest. And I did find girls, I did find drink. I was knocking about with the lads who weren't in the main first team group, who probably, you know, go out for a drink on a Wednesday night, go out for a drink on a Friday night, go out for a drink on a Saturday night. And kind of like, you know, dealt with my disappointment of my career going down the pan in other ways. And that became, you know, the story of my life probably for the next kind of 10 to 12 years afterwards. It was it was.
Would you say that then not haunted you, but for a number of years was that maybe perceived as a lost opportunity, that you were flowed on to other opportunities that then you we'll talk about what they were and how they were, but potentially lost those opportunities because of that first year.
It took me how old am I now? 42. Probably till I was 36, 37 to get over not being a professional footballer.
Right, okay.
And stop being a bit of a a victim about it, or even thinking myself as a footballer or an ex-footballer. Do you know what I mean? It's finding who I am, as a person, which has been resonated through a lot of your conversations, I guess. And I don't know really whether it's because I struggle to forgive myself for not making the most of the opportunity, or the feeling that other people acted in a way that stopped me from having the opportunity. They purposely went out of their way to make sure, for whatever reason, that I didn't succeed. And that links into without going into details, that links into the manager and his son and me playing the same position, you know. There were things that happened in the second year I was there and the year pro that, unfortunately or fortunately, I was the captain of the youth team and the head boy. So if there was any issues within the group, it was on me to be telling the youth team manager. And there was a few issues around the manager's son, which I had to go to the group about, and then I had to go to the youth team manager. And to be fair to Dave at the time, do you really want to take this any further? I'm like, I can't not. I can't not, because I'm the captain. So but it's like, well, I can't not, and he needs to know. So I did, and we did, and that probably was the end of me as a footballer. Even though he gave me a first contract, he sat me down in November, December of that first year pro and said, "You're not going to get another contract." I was like, "You are? You're not going to get another contract?" I said, "I need an operation. I've not been blah blah blah. What do you suggest that I do?" He said, "Well, get it at the end of the season, but you're not going to get another contract." I was like, "Well," so I played for the youth team for the second half of that year pro, which was probably the right place for me, because I wasn't quite ready to jump into the men's world yet, because I just wasn't tough enough. And I did well in that again. We did really, really well. And there was lots of people at the club that couldn't quite believe that I wasn't getting another contract. But then when, like, Gary Gillespie was our coach, and Gary was, a legend, as you know, as a Liverpool fan, and a top bloke. But when he turns around and says to me, word for word, "I can't help you find another club because it would be more than my job's worth," I'm like, I never really asked why. When the manager says, "You're not getting another contract, but I'm not going to help you find another club," like, I didn't ask why. I would just, my feeling was, yeah, that makes sense, because you're a CUNT. Do you know what I mean? You weren't a very nice person to me, so I don't expect anything less. But it felt like everything was against me a little bit. And I couldn't quite figure out what I'd done for that to happen, other than just be a decent human being. And
even in that situation, irrespective of his views and the what's going on and his unwillingness to help, you still don't even need to say it, do you? You can just say, you don't actually have to go to that extra effort and say, "I'm not going to help you." If you're not going to help someone, just say nothing. But it's almost like you say, it's either wanting to put a boot in or be as you describe it, a CU on for what value is it adding saying, "Oh, I can't help you either"? You better say.
And it's not an unusual behaviour in that world. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's not. Everyone's out for themselves ultimately, and I get that to a point, but there's a way to do it. And that I've never squared that circle with football. Pardon?
It'd be to say, in that scenario, there is another way, and it is just to say nothing, just saying, "Look, we can't help you anymore. Good luck."
And I guess I've always, because I'm not, I am pretty driven, and I can be pretty tough when I need to be, but I don't deal with confrontation very well. I never have. I've never had the confidence to stand up for myself. And I've struggled to square that circle, I guess. And I guess a lot of the work that I've been involved with since is trying to create better environments for people to be able to have those conversations and be able to be helped in whatever way they need it, rather than only being able to sort of thrive in an environment if you are a certain type of person. You're missing out on an awful lot of talent by doing that. But back then, you needed to be a very certain type of person to survive in that world, and I wasn't that sort of person. I was lucky I didn't go to Man City or Man United or somewhere like that, because their youth team environments were ruthless, absolutely ruthless. some of the stuff they used to do to each other, and it was bad enough in our environment.
Yeah.
Probably heard of all sorts of stories about what used to go on in those sort of like army or male kind of like initiation sort of stuff. We had to do all of that, and if you didn't,
bits of stuff. Listen to like Crouchy's podcast and his earlier days as a youth player. Yeah.
All the blackballing stuff and singing naked on tables, and all that stuff goes on. And I'm coming from Ballabeg on the Isle of Man, and having to do all of that, and being a very quite introverted personality, that was uncomfortable. You did it, but very quickly you have to swim in the same direction, otherwise you drown, don't you?
100%,
so your moral compass starts to change, and you start to have to become more like the group that you're in order to survive in that group. And my moral compass probably didn't really come back to where I was as a 16, 17-year-old until about a year or two before I moved back to the Isle of Man. So and that was it's that time in my life was a great time. I really enjoyed playing football, but that feeling of what could have been, when you see Stephen Gerrards and Michael Owens and Jamie Carragher's and Browner and various other people you've either played with or played against, David Dunn at Blackburn, and not being too far away at that moment, and them having these fantastic careers, and you don't, and some of it's through your actions, and other bits is because other people have acted against you. It's it took me a long time to get my head around that.
And it sounds a little like we touched just before we came on about Christian, and that's similar kind of, but perhaps not to, I don't know, to the degree of how Christian kind of, by his probably own admission, went in a certain direction. Obviously that never was quite to that extreme direction, should we say, but that haunting of those opportunities that,
it was
potentially lost.
It was Christian used the term self-harm. And I get that 100%. And not maybe at that time in my life, but certainly in the years afterwards, that destructive behaviour. And I didn't ever go down the road of drugs, mainly because I never knocked about with people that did them. It wasn't, maybe I can't ever say that I wouldn't have done or said no. Do you know what I mean? I just never had the opportunity. So it was never a decision for me to make, but certainly around drink and women and, blowing up opportunities and careers and moving on, like that feeling of not being good enough, like the one thing in the world that you wanted to do, that you felt like you were born to do, that you weren't able to do, because and I felt like that world had told me I wasn't good enough. But it's not good enough as a footballer. I used to take myself onto the pitch, whereas, like, I don't know if you've seen the Maradona film, the biopic. Diego was off the pitch and Maradona was on the pitch. Mark Hughes had a persona on the pitch and a different one off the pitch, and maybe I probably needed that to protect myself, because everything was a personal thing with me. Every mistake I made, it affected me as a person. And football telling me that I wasn't good enough was football telling me I wasn't good enough.
I know what you mean.
And then for the next wee while, it was, I'm going to get found out. Everybody will find out I'm not good enough.
That type of thing. Yeah.
If I'm in this environment long enough, if I'm in this relationship long enough, people will find me out for not being good enough. If I'm in, so then I'd be like, well, I'll do these behaviours because this is, because they're not very good behaviours, but I'm not good enough, so that's okay.
Yeah, right.
And there's this kind of like justification thing going on all the time. And I had in 20 years, I think I lived in 24 different houses.
Wow, right.
And jumped around work-wise and jumped around women-wise, and, never stayed in one place long enough to get found out.
Oh, right, okay.
Even though, like, there was nothing to be found out in many
ways.
I
know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean?
You're kind of running away from something you're not really sure what.
Yeah, completely. And
so looking like after, Stockport, I assume then at the end of that contract, did you feel you could then go and find somewhere else, appreciating 3 years earlier Man City sent a letter out to everyone saying, look at this lad, you can now come out of opportunity, where it's basically the opposite, and they're saying, we're not going to do that, and F off.
Yeah.
Was that straight back to the island then, or what was
No, I stayed away.
Right.
I stayed away. I wrote to every club in the Football League and every Scottish club, and got back a few things, and ended up going to Darlington mainly on trial. But they were just using me for games because they didn't quite have enough players. So I got used and abused a little bit there. I needed my operation, so actually the advice from the manager to have my operation towards the end of the season wasn't great advice. I should have had it in November. And then I was fit for the end of the season. So as soon as clubs found out I needed an op to have this stitch removed, then
usually what I thought when you mentioned about him saying wait till the end of the season, but we're not giving a contract part, you think, well, I might as well get it now and rebuild for my future.
Yeah. But so again, goes back to me, that feeling of not being very good at asking questions or asking advice. I didn't go back to my dad, or I didn't go back to Richard, or I didn't, what do you think I should do? It was kind of I do keep everything inside, to be honest. I'm not a great sharer, and I deal with things by myself a lot, which tends to then lead to those kind of destructive, self-harmy sort of bits and pieces, or used to. So yeah, I wrote to that, didn't really get anything back, and then I rang round all the Vauxhall Conference it was then, not the National League, round all those clubs, and ended up going to Stockport. And played there for a year while I put myself through college. I stayed in the digs I was in, so I was still living with the lads who were playing first team football for Stockport. I was going to college, I was working in the local pub, and I was playing for Southport in the National League, or trying to. I was in and out of the team. It was a typical case of not really wanting to trust a younger player. The manager, Paul Futcher, played in the same position. He was 40 odd, but he still wanted to play. So he'd pick himself in the big games. And we got through to the FA Trophy final that year. We played at Wembley. It was the game before the England-Germany game at Wembley, which was one of the last games ever at the old Wembley Stadium. So we went down to that, and right before the game, manager pulls me and said, "Look, you're the youngest, I was the youngest player in the group at that point." He said, "You'll get this opportunity again." And I was like, "They're pulling Wembley down, Gaffer. I'm not going to get this opportunity again." He said, "Well, anyway, that's you. You're not in the squad. If you want to warm up with..." No, he didn't even say that. I asked him, "Can I warm up with the group on the pitch?" And he goes, "Yeah, if you have to, fair enough." So I got to warm up with the group, but I'd played most of the games through to the end of the season, and because I was the youngest and other players were more experienced and didn't have much longer left in their careers, I was the sacrificial lamb, and that killed me as well, because I thought I was good enough, and I felt like that would be a platform for me to show, because it was televised, and I played against that team previously a few weeks earlier and played ever so well. So yeah, that was another kick, and I was like, I felt at the time that football wasn't being fair for me for the effort I was putting into football. I was driving up from Manchester with a couple of other lads 3 times a week. I was getting paid 50 quid expenses, so I was probably paying to play at that point in the National League. And I had this real victim mindset, and they said I could stay at Southport if I wanted to, but they weren't going to put my money up. And I was like, just put my money up a bit and I'll stay. And they didn't want to do that. So I went to Stalybridge Celtic the next year. And, the manager there was really great, was fantastic, played every game, got decent money. But he got the sack halfway through the season. A new guy came in, played a bit, and then his assistant manager came and sat next to me on the coach on a away trip. "So what are your plans for next year?" Knowing I was doing A-levels, and I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. I thought I would maybe go to Loughborough and do sports science, or I'd never thought of what am I going to be if I'm not a footballer? I was just doing A levels to keep myself busy. And he sits down next to me, what are you doing next year? I said, I'm probably going to go to university, to be honest. All right, where are you thinking of going? So I don't know, maybe Loughborough. He says, all right, okay. And then, a little bit of a chit chat, blah, blah, blah. And the next week they cancelled my contract.
Oh, right.
And so,
again, probably not felt you were committed.
Yeah, you're not going to be here next year. We'll save the money, give it to somebody else, see you later. And I'm like, again, it just felt like a kick. And, and then I went somewhere else, and then I went somewhere else. And, it constantly felt like you were like driving uphill. The worst in reverse, basically. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. And there's no such thing as agents. I was probably never good enough to have an agent or anybody fighting my corner. It was kind of me v the world. And
well, it's also because you're living away. Again, I imagine if you've been brought up in Stockport and you might have been going home to your parents day in, day out to live, you'd have been having conversations about your day and I spoke to this and that because you're kind of thrown away and you're trying to make decisions at 16, 17 based off a Ballabeg boy. It's difficult, isn't it?
It is, and you don't. Like, I left home before I really started to have an adult relationship with my parents. Yeah, so I was withholding, and it's probably still, I do. They'll listen to this, and I didn't know any of this, and it's like, I'm sorry, by the way, but yeah, I do withhold quite a lot, because I've not built up those like adult kind of conversations and relationships with people. And football in that world doesn't help you to do that either, because you can't share what you really think, and you're just going to get absolutely destroyed if you do that. So I was withholding a lot. I wasn't really talking to people. I was in touch with my mates back home. I had my best mate, still my best mate now, came to Manchester Uni while I was playing professionally still. And, I started living the student lifestyle, which didn't help playing professional football, but then also with the semi-pro stuff, it became something that I did. And it felt like I had to do it rather than I was really enjoying doing it. It was like, if I didn't do it, I'd be letting people down. And with it being so tough, it almost like I don't want to tell people how tough it is, because, then it looks like I'm failing, and I don't want to admit that. So I probably carried on, even when I went to uni at Bradford. I completely looked into a physiotherapy degree. I failed my A-levels. I got really poor grades in my A-levels. Ended up in a career advisor's office at Ballacameen, because I went in with my dad to have a nat with Jeff Wilkins, and phone rang, Bradford University Physiotherapy Department. Do you have anybody that you know of interested in doing physiotherapy? I was sat in the room at that time. Jeff looked over to me. Are you interested? Yeah, I've always found it interesting. I used to sit with Roger in the physio room for hours, and I used to do ultrasound treatments for him and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'll give that a go. Right, can you get on a plane tomorrow for an interview? Yes. Did it, offered the place, and that was it.
Right.
So it's that serendipity, maybe, whatever, but that's how I got in through clearing into a physiotherapy degree, and tried to play semi-pro while I was doing that.
Right.
But, just pissing in the wind, and eventually got to the point where
why were you pissing in the wind?
Because I'd still not let go of the fact that I was going to be a professional footballer. Everything else I was doing was as a stopgap until I could prove myself to be good enough again. But every step down is further and further away. So I started off at Man City, and that step to the next bit is Stockport. So you've either got to make it there and be good enough, or bounce back to a higher. And then you can slowly come down again. But as soon as you go from Stockport, everything else is just, gradually going further and further down.
Yeah.
I don't quite know what's going on with the camera.
The old Zoom screen's gone. Oh, there you go.
Oh, we're back. So, physio was still something I was doing because I was able to, and not because I loved it, But then I wasn't really loving the football either, because I felt like I was just getting my head kicked in all the time, and I was probably looking back, like I say, I used victim quite a lot, that Bill Bezic sports psych kind of mindset. You're either a victim, a competitor, or a warrior, and Roy Keane's of this world, the Warriors, they drag teams from, you know, and make whole groups follow them. And I used to be a bit like that. I certainly was a competitor most of the time, but I had probably a 12-year period where I was a victim and it was everybody else's fault. And I was just hiding and putting my head in the sand and not wanting really to contribute to life because life wasn't what I wanted it to be. So
and
it was
after your degree, then you went working in various football clubs.
Yeah.
Was there not at this stage, and you're not angry again? I suppose looking at like Christian's story, he became maybe angry and went away from the sport to kind of, because there was bad vibes with it. Was the instinct to go and do sports physio, but not in a football club where it just maybe you look out on the pitch and think I should be out there and just drag these memories back?
Yeah, good point. Like I still felt like I had a point to prove to football because I still felt at that point it was rejecting me. Yeah, so you know, one of my the physio I enjoyed, but it wasn't a passion. You know, a lot of my mates who are physios and work in Premier League football teams now, they love physio, they love that whole bit, and I was doing it because I could and I fell into it. And really it was the sport, like the sports performance element that I was always most interested in. So yeah, I sought that out quite early. Physio was just a way for me to get back into that world and to try and make a mark in that world as a bit of two fingers. Do you know what I mean? It was almost like to be validated by that world meant more to me at that time than it probably should. Because that rejection, I took that rejection so hard. So yeah, I worked 7-day weeks. You know, I was like relentless, really. You know, I was worked at Leeds United when they were in the Premier League and as an academy physio there. So Danny Rose, James Milner, Aaron Lennon, all those guys were part of that place. The head of the academy, Gary Worthington, I think is still the head of international recruitment at Man City now. Dave Harrison, who was a coach there, is one of the head scouts at Man United now. The guys that were in that group as an academy were like Fabian Delph, I mentioned, the coaches and everybody. I learned so much being in that environment for 2 years about football, but also about how football could be done in a better way. You know, and that my experiences weren't the only way. And that maybe I'd just been unlucky or, you know, not selected the best place for me. But yeah, that was a really nice, decent environment. Learned a lot there. I was also doing some rugby league physio. And around that time, I was working in the police rehab centre. I was working private practice. I was working Leeds United. I was working rugby league. And if I wasn't doing that, I was having a drink on a Friday and Saturday night. But that was kind of it. That's all I was doing, and racked up thousands of patient hours or client hours of just, you know. So I got pretty good at, you know, diagnosing and observing and working with people. And then another choice, you know, everything was going really, really well. You know, I'd made a bit of a name for myself. I was doing pretty well, and I'd met a lady who was a little bit older than me, and she'd got a job offer in Vancouver, Canada, and it hadn't been seeing her that long, but long enough for her to say, "Do you want to come?" And long enough for me to say, "You know what's the worst that could happen?" But, you know, part of it was like, I need to get away before something blows up. It's all going too well, so let's go away, let's jump. So I went to Vancouver and lived in Vancouver for a bit, which was quite cool, just before the Winter Olympics there.
What, you doing physio out there as well?
No. So because it was quite quick, I didn't get a visa. I had to go on her visa, and that ended up being a bit of an issue because I wanted to get my own visa and be able to work there in my own right. But those conversations weren't going down too well. So yeah, I blew that relationship up. One night I just left. And ended up back on the Isle of Man, and that's how I first time around ended up back here. Was ran away from a situation in Vancouver because I didn't have the communication skills to deal with it as an adult.
Oh, right, okay. Do you regret going to Canada?
Probably now, yeah, probably. Things were pretty good.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I can't remember who we were chatting to, but they talked about situations where they kind of have knocks of various situations that knock them, and then when things are going well, they've kind of gone into basically F them up, and it's kind of just inbuilt that, well, this is going well. This isn't the norm. I need to do something different. And I just, when you first mentioned there about going to Canada, I wonder whether something subconsciously was going, this is going too good. This can't be right. Yeah. And basically, by making that decision yourself, I'm not saying you effed it up by any stretch, but that, that natural, just what's been ingrained in you for years is then
completely
clouded your judgment. I don't know.
100%. No, I agree. 100%. I mean, I've skipped, for brevity, I've skipped quite a lot of other stuff, and there was that element of self-harm and self-destructive behaviour. Like, you don't deserve to be happy, or you don't deserve things going well, or you're not good enough to have this.
It's weird how the brain works that way, though, isn't it? Because you'd want the brain to be doing the other thing, wouldn't you, of going. And naturally, it just pushes you down the wrong path.
Completely. And, you're not... I got so far away from me and who I am that you're not really thinking clearly. You think like as a wounded animal, do you know what I mean? And that protectionist element, and I needed, so lots of different kind of girlfriends and different jobs, be changing stuff around. You'd get that kind of almost trying to find that validation from somewhere. And once you'd got it, you'd be scared of messing it up, so you'd jump away to the next source of validation. And it was that, as I say, that rejection from the world of football, that was the only place in the world that I'd ever wanted to be validated by, made me very vulnerable, I guess. And I was acting to protect myself, but actually all I was doing was hurting loads and loads of people, or, making my life far harder than it needed to be. I almost needed that stress or that adrenaline hit of those shit moments to feel alive, because everything else was like turned down in volume and colour, and the only time where I felt alive was probably drinking, making love or whatever, and those hedonistic type moments, because everything else was just in kind of like mute and black and white. And
it's amazing, isn't it, looking at it? Like, obviously, I don't know this little bit, but just that couple of early years, how that molded.
Very, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. And it's I don't know, maybe it's that lack of recognition of or acceptance of who you are and what in your early kind of teen or teenage kind of early adulthood, the sooner you can figure out what makes you tick and what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, what floats your boat, what doesn't, the sooner you can figure that out, then you can just kind of stay true to that a little bit more. And if you have some quite big events that happen before you've done that, and you've not got that group of people around you that I didn't, and I could have done, but I didn't ask, I didn't bring people into my world. I pushed people away from it, and still do to a certain extent, I think, it can have some significant impact, but it's not just impact for me, it's the impact for the really great people that I met, who's, while I was in their life, they probably don't think of me in the most positive terms, and that I have to kind of accept they're right.
Well, So you mentioned that you came back to the island with a Canadian accent. So what was the when you came back here, you started working with doing physio again?
So I didn't come back to a job. I just landed back here in a state of crisis, which is probably not uncommon to a lot of people from the Isle of Man. Where do you go when you need to feel safe and secure? And it's home, isn't it? And this little rock.
Did you feel like you were coming back with your tail between your legs at all?
Not really, probably because the gap between going to play football and coming back, it was.
Well, you achieved
12.
a lot, irrespective of your goal was to be that professional footballer. You'd still gone away, you'd studied, you'd gained a reputation in something outside of playing football.
Yeah.
I just ask because, again, sometimes people feel like when they come back to the island, it's, told you so type mentality from the locals. Told you type of thing, which is a load of bull, but I know why.
No, not really, not that I can remember. Certainly from a football point of view, I had no intention of really playing, but I did when I came back. And that first year I was Ireland Player of the Year, and that was probably me trying to prove to people that I was half decent. But then I was
proving to yourself probably more than anything else.
Yeah, like you can still do it, and and I was playing in a position that I would never have played in England. I was back further up the pitch and running about like a headless chicken, and doing all the things that people think make you a good footballer, but actually they don't. So football became quite important to me again to run around, and mainly for the club rushing. I wanted to help them get back to where they were. I believe they should have been. And I was in that little Port Erin bubble. I was living down there with a mate, and that was my little life. I was working at the hospital for a bit, doing outpatients physio. I worked with Isla Scott, and gradually did that more and more, and that became my main focus. And then was helping out with the Institute of Sport Athletes with Isla and giving cover to that group of people as well. And I did 3 or 4 years of that. Met my now wife while I was back that time, and again things were going pretty well. But I just had that itch to prove myself in football.
Right.
And rightly or wrongly, I convinced Sarah that going to Glasgow was a good idea.
Right, okay.
And I applied for a job at Glasgow Rangers, and got it. Yeah, and without knowing anybody there. Just off the back of beat me, which was lovely. It was a real confidence boost for me, to be honest. It was off the back of what I'd done on the Isle of Man, the direction I was going in with my thinking, with player development, obviously my background in football, and just got on with the guys there quite well. So, we within 3.5 years of being back, I was back away again.
Right.
Never had as much money as I had back then as a family or an individual. It's been a struggle since we moved.
Right.
Because the roles that I took are not your big roles that are going to set you up for life. So,
what was life like in Glasgow?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. It's an amazing football club. There's 2 amazing football clubs there. And it's an institution. It means so much to people. One half of the city, anyway, one half of Northern Ireland, and Celtic represents the other half. And it was a pinnacle of most people's work life who were working there. They were all Rangers fans. They'd all grown up with the club. There was legends walking around the corridors who were involved with the club. Walter Smith was the manager. Coisty, Ian Durant. Going into work every day and getting ripped by them. For no good reason is is an enjoyable experience. So you really felt part of the family. I went and got a job there as one of the academy physios, and Sarah didn't have a job when we came over, but she actually ended up getting a job at the press office there. So she ended up in that family as well. And we got really well looked after. Once they realised we were from the Isle of Man, they were brilliant. The guy who's still there now, Jimmy, took him nearly 12 months to speak to me because he just don't allow people in to that world.
Right. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? You've got to earn the trust and earn the respect to be allowed in by some of those people because they've seen so many people come and go, and they see people use that institution for their own needs, not for the best of the institution. So people like Jimmy are there, like the guardian angels of that culture and that institution, what it means to the people, and you respect that a lot. And it was a wonderful time of work, and some great people who are still there now. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed that time. I did a bit of coaching there as well, which was nice. They enabled me to coach in the academy as well as be one of the main physio there. So yeah, it was really good.
What brought that to an end? Working up there,
Craig White.
Oh right, okay.
Administration.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, right.
Yeah, right, so okay. Yeah,
the old EBTs.
Yes. So we were Walter. I went in a March, so they won that league, and then they won the next year with Walter's last season, and then Coisty was in the last season that I was there. And in the March, it was all, January onwards, it was all kicking off. Sarah was 6 months pregnant when it all started. We were the last two in. We were a little bit unsure about job security and everything else. And I, as the man of the house, took a decision that I need to kind of try and protect my family,
of course.
A new family. So I started looking for jobs, and ended up getting the head of sports science and medicine at Norwich City, who were just going into the Premier League, or were a Premier League, just going into the Premier League for the first time in a while, at their academy. And it was a step up responsibility-wise, it was a step up wage-wise. I just felt like it was a more secure place.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But it was another example of me blowing up a reasonably good situation that we had in Glasgow. We bought a house there. We had a lovely, neighbourhood. We were in.
That was outside your control, surely, because you would have not, with what happened ultimately at Rangers. You wouldn't have.
Yeah, everyone who was still there when I was there, everyone who's there now is still.
Oh, really?
Kept their jobs. Yeah, so I'd have been fine. We were panicking over nothing, but you do, because you got a new life coming into the world.
Yeah,
you want to be able to provide, and we look back now and go, maybe we'd have made a different decision, but it is what it is. And
seems a pretty logical decision, especially with a family coming to go, what security is here?
It was quite a stressful time, really, because obviously all the Rangers, the guys who were there, and Rangers fans, they'd do anything for the club, and they certainly wouldn't desert a sinking ship. And here's me, one of the last ones in, looking to desert the sinking ship. And there was that sense that you needed to be there to help out, because we bought into that whole community. But at the same time, it's like, well, we need to look after our little girl. And they were really good with us. They didn't bear any grudges or anything like that. But, there was very much that feeling of like, we're all in it together. Let's kind of stick it out and see this through, and trying to keep as many jobs as possible. And they managed to do that, which is fantastic. The players, took a big wage deferral, or didn't get paid for a while, and you made some really good choices in order to keep the staff on. But I'd gone by that point, and we'd gone down to Norwich when my daughter was 6 weeks old, I think,
right.
which is a big step.
Yeah.
But no, Rangers was class. It gave me an opportunity to run a department, gave me an opportunity to put some different ways of working and different working practices in, which was building on the great stuff that was already there.
Right.
It really was a good thing personally and professionally, and Sarah was having a really good impact on me as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. From the family side.
Yeah, she didn't allow me to push her away.
Yeah, right. That's good.
Which is the first time that anyone has ever been like that with me. Do you know what I mean? I still was messing up. I was still trying my best to put a bomb under the situation from time to time, but she didn't. She believed in me, which
right.
was
great,
and what I needed.
Felt that for a long time, I'd imagine.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So life at Norwich, you're there a few years? Year
and a half.
Right.
Year and a half. That was great. In a very different way.
I'd imagine it's a very family club as well.
It is. It was similar in the sense that a lot of people there were Norwich fans. A lot of the staff that worked there were people from Norwich or had been there a long, long time, like the guys out at Rangers. So it's very similar in that regard. But then you've gone from, Rangers, one of the biggest clubs in the world, but no disrespect to the Scottish Premiership, but it's not the greatest of standards, and they can go and do decent things, no matter what team they put out. And then you go to Norwich and they're in the Premier League and it's just cutthroat. Within 12 weeks, I was considering handing my resignation in, because the environment was just so very, very different. And there was two people in particular that, we were having. So I'd come in as the head of sports science and medicine, and that essentially put me onto the management committee of the academy. So you had me, the academy manager, the head of coaching, and the head of recruitment, which was this management committee. And for those people that know a bit about football, I moved to Norwich just at the same time as something called the EPPP was starting. So the Premier League and the FA set up a brand new way for the academy structures to work in England, which essentially was trying to create different categories of academies. So you had Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4 academies. And the Cat 1s were meant to be these all singing and all dancing academies, where you can have experts in roles, so people didn't need to feel like they had to work with the first team to get paid better. You could have people who are expert on developing players between 18 and 23 and 14 and 16 and 12 and below. And the premise behind it was really, really good, but you had to go through an audit process. So we wanted to be a Category 1 club, but we had zero of the infrastructure to be a Category 1 club. And I came in March, and we had an audit in September. So we had between March and September to create a Category 1 academy. And that was with ended up with 5 mil funding. And some of that was from the Premier League. Once you became Cat 1, they'd give some of you back. But that was 5 mil that the first team manager wasn't getting for players in the Premier League. Yeah, so there was this kind of loggerheads between, and Paul Lambert was great. Obviously he's best mates with Ali McCoist. He was one of my favourite players as a football player, and I'd be sat having breakfast with him and having a bit of a natter with him, which was great. The two guys that worked underneath him were interesting characters, and there's no need for me to mention names. If you anybody wants to Google how Paul Lambert got on at Aston Villa and what happened to some of the staff members at Villa after a year or two, then things will become clear. But they were very much like that in Norwich as well, and they were trying to drive a wedge between the academy and the first team, and they saw me as one of the new recruits. I was coming in getting paid reasonably good money, and there was first team members of support staff that weren't getting that money, and that caused an issue. So I was seen as an issue, and as a big issue really. And so they were trying to drive a wedge between the first team and the academy, and they were also trying to drive a wedge between me and other members of staff, and they were trying to drive a wedge between the medical department and the football department. So it was just this horrible, bitchy, watching your back type of environment that I just wasn't used to, and it was kind of reminding me back to the good old days of Stockport and the non-league scene, and everybody out for themselves and not thinking about the best interests of the players at the club. And it was a horrible place to be. But I stuck it out, and mainly because I had nowhere else to go, and I had a young family, and I couldn't go home and tell Sarah what shit day I'd had, because she's stuck at home, with a little one, and really trying to figure her world out, let alone helping me to figure mine out. So, we created, and I was, probably one of the proudest things that I've done is create a department, sports psychs, strength and conditioning, sports science, performance analysis, diet and nutrition, medicine, and physio. That was my remit. So we created a department pretty much from scratch. We
pretty broad remit as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically everything but coaching. That was my department, and I had to basically settle the way we worked, how we worked, and also recruit all the staff for it, alongside recruiting the staff for the other departments as well. So from a learning experience point of view, I was 33, maybe 34, huge amounts of responsibility and autonomy, which was brilliant. And I'm pleased to say that a lot of the staff that came into Norwich are either still there or working in professional sport in, fantastic roles at the moment. So we got our recruitment really good. We became a Category 1 football club with one of the best marks in the whole country. We were doing stuff 10 years ago that a lot of teams are only just starting to do now. We had a good, young, innovative group that I'd like to think I set out an environment which really benefited them and the players. And, we won the Youth Cup that year, under-18s, and we beat Chelsea in the final over 2 legs. We have players that have come out of that. Josh and Jacob Murphy have played in the Premier League, Cardiff and Newcastle. Harry Toffolo is playing in the Championship with Huddersfield. Cam McGeehan's playing at Portsmouth at the moment. Remy Matthews is playing at Bolton. We were lucky with a good group of players, but we did really well in a short space of time, and it was a tough year. It probably wasn't the right place to be with a 6-week-old or 1-year-old daughter, but I'm really proud that I managed to do both, support Sarah as much as I could, and also create that department and create the ways of working within that department that were quite forward thinking at the time. So yeah, that was good.
And then you came back to the island after that.
Yeah, I got that's so looking back now, I can say that's like point proved. If you go back to validating yourself in football, do you know what I mean? That I've done that, and that huge drive that I had to do it is kind of gone and went as soon as I'd done it. I kind of proved myself that I can not only be accepted in that world, but also lead within that world. And that was a big thing for me, I think, and I took an awful lot of confidence from it. But what it wasn't doing was enabling me to have a good home life. The amount of hours, Norwich is 5 hours away from everywhere on a coach. So, when we're playing away trips, you're done for 2 days pretty much. Most trips are overnight stays. So, with Sarah and the little one, little Lila, we're an awful lot of pressure on our relationship, really. And it got to a point where I had to choose between my career and whether I wanted to contribute effectively to my family, or do I want to do what a lot of people were doing in that environment, which was living away from home and visiting family on days off. And I chose family, which I wouldn't have done probably a few years earlier. Yeah. But I did because I felt like the point had been proved, and people in the environment I was in at Norwich could not get their heads around that, because I was giving up, a lot of people's dream in order to make sure I still had a wife and child that I could see regularly. So, but I've never been more comfortable with a decision in all my life. I was still struggling at that point from the destructive self-harming behaviours were there in the background. So the last kind of 12 weeks of being in Norwich, I was seeing a therapist. I had counselling. It got to a point where I needed to do something about it to be a good influence at home. Do
you think the stressful environment you were working in was contributing to that, I assume, if it was?
Yes. My triggers are used to be stress, used to be tiredness, and being by myself. I'm not great by, when Christian talks about it, I'm not great by myself, but I like being by myself. But I need to be busy when I'm by myself. I can't sit and watch a film. I can sit and read a book, but the book needs to be informing me most of the time. I'm a bit like Johnny Five. I need input, and I need input that's gonna, make me think and
stimulate.
I don't switch off easily. And then, if you feel you need to be busy, then you get busy doing things that maybe aren't always helpful. So it was a decision that we both made, and I was reticent to start with, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made to go and speak to somebody about it. And obviously a lot more detail than I'm talking to you, but it certainly helped me. I think one of the first things I said to her was, I don't feel myself. And she said, when did the last time you felt like yourself? And I said, well, probably when I was 16, 17. that I want to get back to, knowing you're not going to have that childlike naivety, but that feeling of, you're comfortable in your own skin. And she helped me to get closer to that. And the last, since we're back on the island, like I couldn't have come back to the island and stayed here without doing that, I don't think, because I don't know, it wasn't always a place I wanted to be. But
she helped you process it all.
Yeah, completely. And it was great. And I still speak to somebody now. Just over a year ago, I was struggling, but not with destructive behaviours. Just struggling. I had no direction and not quite sure what I was going to do, and like proper struggling. Started talking to somebody again, and that's really helped me.
I think that battle's always ongoing, isn't it? In some level of that. Matt and I were talking yesterday just about, even now with what's going on in this isolation, that impact that it has on you and your mental state. That there's always some form of battle going on. And it's just picking up those signs earlier as possible.
Early enough.
So,
yeah, definitely. And the work. I still wanted to. When I moved back to Ireland, I still wanted to stay involved in professional sport. And trying to find a way to do that. And I was lucky enough to work for an Australian company that was a tech startup, wearable movement sensors, and I was even more fortunate to go in and do stuff with the FA and Man United and Man City and various other places, and going around scrabbling underneath underground trains and on the tube and doing night shifts, walking around all the tube stations, and got to see some amazing stuff and work with some really fantastic teams of people. And with me observation head on, learning an awful lot through that experience. And but as I became a bit more comfortable with myself, I didn't feel like I needed that validation of this is who you work for, or this is who you're working with. And just because you work with a professional athlete, it doesn't mean you're any good at your job or you're a decent human being. And more often than not, but that's how we measure, isn't it? And it, or society can measure. And it's taken me a long, long time to start measuring success. And I saw this the other day that I quite like on my own internal tick sheet rather than the external tick sheet. I'm still not quite there, and I don't think I ever will be, because I got rewarded in my youth by being good at stuff, and that's where I got my praise, that's where I got my attention, that's where I got recognition, by being good at stuff and having an end product. You don't get, in life at the minute, you don't tend to get what we are. The last 2 weeks we are, aren't we? Because we're starting to recognise people who do stuff that we take for granted. We're starting to actually enjoy saying hello to people when we pass them on the other side of the road. Whereas before you'd put your heads down, and there's those little bits that maybe haven't felt important are now maybe people opening their eyes a little bit more about they are a little bit more important, and maybe we will recognise them a little bit more. And that external validation of doing something or being good at something isn't the validation that people actually need. To help them grow and develop and to figure things out. So it's taken me a hell of a long time, and I feel a different person, and I feel like that 20-year bit in between is somebody else.
All right, that's exactly what Christian said.
I try and think about. I've got memories of it. I understand, I know it was me, but it doesn't feel like me. It feels like I'm watching a video or a film of somebody else acting. It's a strange feeling, really. And
I can relate as well. Sort of earlier years, I just feels like it wasn't, not that I have any, but it just feels like, I don't know whether when you're going on kind of journeys of self-development and awareness, whether you just, the mind pushes that memory to make you think it was someone else because you've moved on. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been searching for answers for a long time. Some of it has been personal, but I spend an awful lot of time now looking at, the work we're doing with Isle of Man Sport Aid Academy, especially over the last 5 years. It's about how can you help, not even help people, how can you design the best environment possible to help people who are capable of it progress through that system as best as possible and as many as possible. We have such a finite resource on the Isle of Man that you can't afford to lose people. And sport is the thing that I know. Sport's the thing that I love. I hated football for a long time. I still can't sit and watch football with that same passion and emotion that I used to have, because I've seen behind the curtains of it, and it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And so I don't see it as a fan, but I try and see it as my work now is trying to create these environments that help as many people as possible, and give them the skills to navigate the shit world and the shit life that navigate it as best you can yourself, and build a support system around you to make sure you can. And you've got people to talk to, and you're building the skills, and you're thinking about things in a half decent way, because maybe, I said it before, maybe a little bit of his therapy for me, or maybe a little bit of his trying to put in place stuff that I didn't feel that I had, I think if I did, I'd have probably been a little bit better off. But also because we've seen so many people on the island who've gone and done fantastic stuff up to the age of 20, 21, 22, 23, and then fallen away. I've worked with huge numbers of young footballers who, including myself, who thought they were going to have a career in the game, and then they haven't, and then they're lost, and they just haven't got a clue what to do with themselves. So trying to... That
identity is, you just, virtually everyone we chat to, certainly who's been in sport at any level, is, that episode Mark that came out a couple of days ago was the same. Identities, and obviously Rich talks about it from a psychology point of view, that having that other identity outside is so important.
It's understanding that it's part of you, but it's not defining you. And for years it defined me and who I was, and whether I was a successful or unsuccessful, or success or failure. So as much as we talk with the young people, you're a son, you're a daughter, you're a friend, you're a student, you're a colleague, you play loads of different roles in your life, and if you can be as authentic to yourself within all of those roles, then the more kind of easier things will be for you. But you do maybe have to change things a little bit to fit into certain areas, but you shouldn't be changing your moral compass or the core beliefs that you have and the core things of who you are. Because if you do that for long enough, then there's going to be this kind of like collision between yourself and how you're acting, and it's not going to end particularly well.
So those, I suppose, picking up on those roles, and I suppose more now going, so in 2000 and locally in the community, you in 2017 you became the manager of the Isle of Man team. So just to go back to something you mentioned at the start, which I've been meaning to pick up on when you said about observing football. And again, I watched a reasonable amount of football through my life, and I think I understand the game, but I know I probably don't. The reality is, and I remember an interview with, I think, Carragher, and he was talking about Benitez and how he was very educated in the game from that standpoint at a very early age, and that's how he plays the game now. Now, listening to yourself and listening to that story about Benitez, I'd imagine people like yourself see the game very differently from how who I think I know the game reasonably well, probably see the game. Would that be a fair statement?
I
appreciate you don't know how I see a game.
I don't know. There's also the arrogance of expertise, isn't there? So a lot of people in football and a lot of people in sport think that because they're in that their opinions are better than other people. Do you know what I mean? So, like, there's lots and lots of people that can't be in the pubs at the minute, but sat watching games with your mates or whatever that hold very fair views and analysis behind what is or isn't going on. Do you know what I mean? But the football world is arrogant, or so arrogant to think that they know better. And that's part of the issues within football, is that it's not very open. Not many open doors for people outside of that football world to come in and influence. They're better than they were, but they're still not as good as they could be. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. One of the things I found going into football is that interest in exploring other fields now. Your pro license type people now, your managers in the professional game, they have to go and do case studies in different sports. So that's a nice starting point. But how well read are they around some of the other stuff? And the better managers will spend time reading psych stuff. They'll read, they'll be broad readers of lots of different things and then take bits back in. And certainly one of the things I've done throughout my career is that kind of lifelong learning and making sure that I'm reading a real broad spectrum of stuff, from whether it's anthropology or philosophical type stuff, through to football specific tactical periodization papers, from real scientific journals to the other spectrum. And then taking little bits from everything and bringing it into what you're doing is really, really important. For a while in football, the professions have pushed onto the coach. So, sports psych with Rich, and I was in a department that was trying to influence coaching behaviour, and we became too loud. But that's because the coaches didn't know enough about what we were doing in order to push back.
See the value,
Yeah. So I'm not an expert in all the departments I managed at Norwich, but I know enough to call bullshit. And I know enough to challenge my staff to say, why aren't you doing that? And if they can give me a good reason, great. And if they don't know about it and I do, then that's an issue. So I always challenge myself to read as broadly as I can, so as I can understand where the BS is flying around, ignore all of that, find the experts and listen to them a little bit more, and then try and tweak what they're doing into my environment. And that's kind of how I've always tried to work.
Yeah, it's a leadership quality, that, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
it is.
I think so. I just think it's good practice, but not everybody follows good practice, because they sit in their own little silo. And that's maybe one of the reasons we're in the situation we're in the world at the moment, is we're all sat we're so interconnected, but we're all in our little silos. And, we're not appreciative of how our actions and behaviours impact other people. And I'm hoping that at the back end of this, that we become a little bit better at that, and understanding that actually what I do will have a ripple on somebody else, will have a ripple on somebody else. And that we're quite a fragile system. And a lot of my work in academy football, and certainly within the work I'm doing on the Isle of Man, is trying to build this, nick a term from a prominent author, anti-fragile system, where actually it can adapt and respond and rebuild itself better than it was, rather than break at the first sign of an issue, or not be able to respond or adapt quickly enough to cope with the situations going on around it. So we've got these really fragile systems in the world, and the sports system is a fragile system, and the individuals often within sport are fragile systems. So how can we help them to be anti-fragile? It's not just good enough not to break. You've got to absorb that and turn it into something better. And a lot of my reading, I guess, has been around how we can develop those systems, and complex systems which are interconnected, interrelated, and dependent upon each other to work effectively. And sport is just a really small little ecosystem within a bigger ecosystem. So we need it all to be working properly to get a professional athlete out the other end of it. We can't just focus on one area. And
I suppose that brings nicely into, obviously, how we certainly crossed paths initially a few months back around the sporting club and that project. So maybe just set the scene for people that, obviously, it's been in the media a bit recently, but where that idea came from and how you're trying to progress that on the island now.
Yeah, it's been floating around in my mind for a while. When I left Norwich, I said to the guys, they were like, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go back, and we've got this amazing environment on the Isle of Man. We've got this amazing opportunity to have where kids are exercising lots, doing lots of different sports. And we've got a bit of a pathway into professional sport. People go to the Olympics. I'm going to go and work in that environment and help us create more professional athletes, gold medal winners. Oh, that sounds amazing. It is. Like, you know, once I started reading around what good environments are, the Isle of Man is a great environment. You know, there's lots of research that suggests the Isle of Man and the Manx community is in this little sweet spot for developing professional people in a wide variety of things, but most of the research around sport. So these communities between 50 and 120,000 people have disproportionately high levels of professional athletes and Olympians from them. And the Isle of Man's no different, just no one's ever done any research on the Isle of Man. So I knew I was coming back to this melting pot of amazing opportunity. And a lot of the work I've done with Isle of Man sport has been trying to make sure we minimise the negatives that being on the Isle of Man can give to our young people and accentuate the positives. And we're doing quite well with that. But one of the things that's really lacking, especially for a lot of people, is this opportunity. So we're quite good at supporting them in grassroots and developmental, but then giving them the platform to then go and progress in a professional environment, you know, we're kind of leaving it up to them to figure it out themselves.
Kind of pop them off, don't we?
Yeah, and we go, right, go on, see you later. Go and try and find a team, go and try and find that. They're doing it themselves. There's not a huge amount of targeted support or planned support to help people to do that. They either do it off their own back, or they come back tail between their legs a little bit maybe, or they struggle around for a year or two and then end up coming back or whatever. And working with the Sport Aid Academy over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, we've been saying to them, like, so our job, if we're doing a job well, is to provide you with the skills or the opportunities to develop the skills required for when you get the opportunities. So Rich Sill was talking about critical events or transitions. Yeah, so a big transition for a Manx athlete is moving off the Isle of Man. So we're trying to help them to have these, be ready to cope with those opportunities when they arise. But Isle of Man sport can't do everything for every sport to provide the opportunities. Yeah, we're helping you develop yourself so you can cope when the opportunity is there, but where's the opportunity coming from? And what we're kind of seeing is there's not a huge amount of opportunity being provided in a targeted way, really, within the sports, because quite rightly, the sports are working on having competitions and grassroots and, you know, just making sure the sport exists on the Isle of Man. Mm-hmm. People think they're doing sports performance on the island, but they're not, you know, and too much time and effort is going into these sports performance-y sort of stuff on the Isle of Man with the wrong people, rather than focusing on the grassroots and development stuff that actually we're amazing at. And let's just keep being amazing at that. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm there stood in front of 14, 15, 16-year-olds saying it's not our job to provide the opportunities, that's your sports job, but not really seeing the sports providing those opportunities as frequently or as maybe as well as they could do. I'm also I'm lecturing at the Isle of Man College on sports coaching and sat in front of young people going, you need to find opportunities to do blah, 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 and they don't really exist. And then working with the Isle of Man football team players going, you know, you've just beat Brentford 5-3 last year. Some of you are bloody good footballers. If you had the opportunity to do da-da-da, it doesn't exist. You know, so I'm there going, I'm identifying here there's somebody needs to be putting these opportunities at the right time with the right people in the right way in a joined up manner in order to help people that we know are good enough to progress off the Isle of Man. And when's somebody going to do it? And this, me 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, would be waiting for somebody to do it. You know, I'm 40 odd now. I've got quite a lot of experience in this area. How can I help? And how can a group of us help the Isle of Man and the young athletes to progress? Well, maybe we can provide those opportunities. How are we going to do it? Well, we can do it in a way that that is protective over our interests, or we can do it in a way that tries to spread the wealth and spread the benefits of the project out beyond into as many different parts of our community as possible. So like football is what I know. It's taken me a long time to be comfortable with, actually, I enjoy football, I like football, and it's okay that that's my thing. Like I flirted with going into rugby, I flirted with swimming, I flirted with other things, but I'm starting from scratch there. I know a lot about football, and I know what's good about it. I know what maybe isn't quite so good. I've set up an environment that is successful on an external tick sheet. So can we do that on the Isle of Man? And if we're going to do that, can we do that with a model that benefits the whole community? So that's a long-winded way of saying that it's been in my head for a while to set up a sporting club with a European-style model where you have multiple teams from multiple different sports within the same sporting club. So those teams are linked to each other, and therefore what's good for one is good for another. They're not going to like start doing stuff that is going to be detrimental to that other team, because what we're seeing in local sport echoes what we see in England at the moment, with sports making decisions to try and get hold of young people at earlier age groups in order to make sure that they stay within that sport and they then don't get to go to another sport. So you need to find a way for that not to happen, and actually sports work together for as long as possible to make sure they keep as many as possible engaged within sport. And then maybe when you get to 15, 16, 17, you can start to take people into the sports that they enjoy the most and are good enough to do at a decent level. So sporting club was kind of the idea in order to bring a bit of a focus to that. And we're starting off with a football team that hopefully will play off island, and a men's and women's cycling teams that will compete in national series as a continental cycling team. But the idea really is that those teams give the Isle of Man a springboard. The people's within them, the coaching staff, the performance staff, the athletes, also the sponsors, also the supporters, also any aspects of the Manx community that would like to be involved, an opportunity to showcase what they're doing and to start shouting about what good things we have going on the Isle of Man, really, and but also filling that competition gap, so building the skills required in order to survive in a pretty cutthroat world in a way that we believe is a good way of doing it. Like, you don't have to be a dick to be successful. You don't have to, have this capitalist model in order to be successful. You don't have to be cutthroat and do things that will make things worse for somebody else in order to be successful. So we think the project will work if the community can get behind it, and I guess I need to find a shorter way of saying why it's a good idea.
And how have you found the community receptive to it over the first period?
So yeah, pretty good. Like, when you sit down and talk to people about it, they get excited. They can see why it would be beneficial beyond the 11 players on the football pitch, or the 6 men and 6 women cycling away. It is maybe we're struggling to get beyond football at the moment. A lot of people may be thinking it's just a way for us to have a football club set up, but the model has always been, let's have a sporting club, which is a membership club, so 20 quid you can pay, become a member of that club, which means you're an owner of the teams that it owns. And then the football club is the bit that hopefully will generate the most revenue, so as more and more teams can be added to that. But I think we haven't launched it yet, but we're trying to find a way to explain it in such a way that people go, yeah, I get it, and we've had people from Canada and Australia, part of the Manx societies, that get it, and they're going like, I can't wait. It's a way for us to feel connected to the Isle of Man. It's something we can follow on a week-to-week basis. I didn't have the opportunity of going to football matches with my dad as a kid. You know, there's lots of opportunity, lots of things that we live on the Isle of Man that are we going to, you know, think we used to be able to do, in the sense of, you know, 4 months ago you can go and watch Everton play or watch Liverpool play with your dad. And when are we going to be able to do that again easily? But hopefully this club gives people opportunity to access those type of experiences that people have in England by being connected to a club that is part of them, that they don't currently have, and a way to bring people together on a weekly basis that, with the fracturing of our society, you know, church isn't quite as important as it used to be, pubs aren't the meeting place they used to be, the smaller communities, you know, there's less meeting of people in a social way, and we hope that the football matches can turn into that, and a place where people value coming together with a group of like-minded people and being part of something bigger than themselves. And then if you've got the cycling teams competing in Europe, you know, on a week-to-week basis, the island can get behind that and be part of something that's bigger than themselves. You know, we have these festivals, we have the Island Games, we have our national teams going away and doing stuff, but they don't happen very frequently. So we follow them in the moment, but there's nothing there to keep it going. Whereas these week-to-week games and competitions, hopefully that the teams from Sporting Club will be part of, gives that narrative to Manx life, and we can. Sport is a way for us to figure ourselves out and put into context the crap that's going on around us a little bit, and maybe release some of that emotion if we're not comfortable in doing it in other ways. And we don't have that release on the Isle of Man other than playing. But if you're not playing and you're not interested in playing, you can't follow. And this hopefully will give a place for people to follow and be part of a bigger narrative and a bigger story that hopefully not just promotes the people who are involved in it on a day-to-day basis, but also the businesses and the community and everything else.
I'm sure. I mean, I've been involved in the cycling side for a couple of years on the, I suppose, that community and club feel. And I mean, I work with committee people that, again, don't race, don't compete, but they want to be part of that community and contribute towards it. So there's people out there, and I'm sure it's the same in all sports. And if you can then bring up that focal point and then add on the fact that you can build this pathway, whatever that sport might be for these individuals, then surely that's the only thing is a good thing, isn't it? There's no negative in that or.
Well, you'd hope so, but the bit is about how it adds value to what's already there rather than detracts from what's already there. And you know, I'm a bit of a thinker, and I probably overthink and think too much, but one of the things I'm quite good at is looking at secondary and tertiary consequences to actions, and it's trying to minimise those secondary and tertiary risks to the project, and making sure that everything has been thought through. If we do this, then what will happen, or what's the likely, and let's choose the one that's going to be the least worst outcome, and trying to minimise the harm in what we do, you know, so that, you know, without going a bit too political or, you know, too of the moment, you know, should we or shouldn't we wear a face mask, you know, when we're out and about? Well, all the research suggests the face mask is there to stop you from infecting other people. So it minimises the harm to others, that action, but it doesn't necessarily protect you. So depending upon what way you look on that, you're going to go, yeah, I'll wear one, or no, I won't. My training as a physio is do the least harm possible. So every action we take with the sporting club has to do the least harm possible. Actually, in a really shit circumstance, but the good outcome is people are now starting to think, what's the least harm I can do with my actions to other people? That's not a bad thing. Because then we stop trying to do things to other people, because quite a lot of the things we do that we think are helping people are actually going to harm them, because we're adding stuff into a complex system. Actually, you've got to strip stuff out of a complex system, and then you're probably going to get less harm. So, you know, like I say, I overthink stuff. And
I think that's right. I hope.
But this project is based around that. Is like, how can we create this wonderful bubbling, melting pot of an ecosystem through sport on the Isle of Man that creates as many benefits as possible by stripping out all the stuff that potentially could be harmful. And we won't get it right, you know, we not from day one, but you know, my message to a young footballer? Do you want to be good at football, or do you want us to be interested in you in 10 years' time? Well, do dancing, go to gymnastics, ride your bike, go and play rugby, go and do all those, so I'm not going to say you've got to be in our academy from 4 years of age, because that's what the English system are doing, and we know that's crap. So it's those messaging is like, how can we push things out that we know is going to be beneficial to as many as possible, but ultimately it's the right advice as well.
So the people that want to learn more about it, you've got a Facebook page which we'll stick in our footnotes, and obviously to reach out to yourself as well, to talk to yourself. We got a website which is sportingclub.im, and the Facebook group which is just Sporting Club Isle of Man. We've also got, like, the football group is established, and we've got sorry, that's the wife saying I've been talking too long. Sorry, Sarah saying she's been talking too long. The Facebook group is for football club is FC Isle of Man, and we're in the process of doing some stuff with the cycling as well. But we're hopeful that the sporting club thing will go live in the next few weeks. We want to be sensitive to what's going on the Isle of Man at the moment, and we hope that the story and what we're trying to do will be something that builds a positive. Hopefully ultimately what's going through, what you are seeing now is that community, like you say, people waving at you, and that back to the core of the community, and hopefully that seems to be one of your key values within what you're doing at the sporting club. So it's, to me, although it's a shitty situation we're all in, and people far worse, unfortunately, than ourselves, but it might help the opportunity that you're trying to create ultimately.
Hopefully, and
take some good out of it.
And if people, the tricky bit, I guess, for us now in the next year or two is that, we were kind of set up and ready to go and play in the league in the summer. The cycling team was hopefully ready to go next year. If people think that's a half decent thing for our community, then, hopefully 20 quid, for 8, 10, 20,000 people, because there's the Manx heritage connections that you have all around the world, isn't too big an ask, because our businesses will be struggling for a little while. There's no getting away from that. And part of our focus now for the sporting club is to build a platform that can really help those businesses to reboot, to find new opportunities, to become established again, and start bringing some money in over the next few years. And if that means more people from our community pay 20 quid in order to give them that platform, I think that's an awesome way of doing that. So
couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for your time today. I'll let you get back to the family.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being obviously, very honest in some of your conversations there about your struggles as well. And I think it's always good sometimes it's hard to talk publicly about those things, but I think people I've seen people take positives and reach out to people, and sometimes people are in those same circumstances and they think no one else is going through it, and when they hear it from other people who've been through it, they can, it just gives them some understanding that they're not alone in those situations. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I hope so. I think, everyone has their struggles, none of us we're perfectly imperfect, so absolutely. We're, it's just on a sliding scale of how bad it is on a day-to-day basis. 100%. Do you know what I mean? So, sometimes I don't really talk about it much, because I don't want it seen as an excuse, or it's easy to talk about it these days because kind of everybody is, but at the same time, it's an acknowledgement that life's tough, and stuff happens, and we don't all deal with it as well as we could do, but a bit of time and a bit of patience with yourself more than anybody else, and get through the other side. So
agree. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to my comment at the start and why Matt's been so quiet, because clearly you are hungover. But
is he still there?
He's vomiting in a bucket in the corner. I don't know whether you just want to wrap up, Matt.
Yeah, will do. So whether you're listening or watching, please like, subscribe, share, and leave those 5-star reviews please. Find us on social media. On Facebook, the M-Word Podcast. Twitter, Manx Sports Pod. And on Instagram, we are the M-Word IOM.
Cheers. Thanks for letting us get into your ears once again. It's word out from Martin.
Word out from Martin.